All right, good evening, everyone. We are going to call to order our public hearing at 5:45. Can I have a motion to open up the public hearing to accept unanticipated revenue from the Revenue Memo, Health Trust Funds, and Copiers? First by Ms. Parisi, second by Ms. Grund. All in favor, please raise your hands. Great, that motion passes. Ms. Facey.
Yes, thank you. So tonight we have two items for this public hearing. The first is unanticipated revenue for FY22 for the return of surplus funds from Health Trust for medical and dental premiums. And the second is unanticipated revenue for FY23 for a buyback of copiers in the SAU. I know you've all heard this before, but I'm going to go through my same spiel that I gave at the school district meetings. So as best practice moving forward, we will be looking to have public hearings to accept all unanticipated revenue that was not budgeted. This is important because the district is not able to spend more than what has been legally appropriated, even if there is offsetting revenue. So to avoid potentially spending over the approved appropriations, grants and other unanticipated revenue should be accepted at a public hearing. Once approved to accept and expend the revenue, the budget may be amended so that the revenue and appropriations may be increased. And this public hearing is the first step to move towards best practices. For the Health Trust unanticipated revenue, on November 23rd, 2021, SAU 39 received a return of FY21 surplus funds for the SAU 39 districts from the return of surplus from medical and dental premiums. The SAU's portion of the return is $26,364. This public hearing is to authorize the SAU board to accept this revenue. Should the board approve to accept this revenue, we will isolate the funds in their own account so that they can be tracked easily. SAU copiers. Over the past year, it has become evident that many of the copiers in the school districts and SAU are at or nearing end of life. After a review of the existing equipment used to copy and print, it was determined the most efficient plan was to drastically reduce the number of printers and replace the outdated copiers that are constantly breaking down and are difficult to service. After a comprehensive review of quotes from 3 vendors, the proposal from Budget Document Technologies was determined to be the most competitive. Budget proposes replacing 20 district copiers with new Kanoka Minolta leases. 4 of the newer copiers throughout the district will remain in service. This proposal also includes the paper cut solution to track and manage printing to reduce waste and potentially save money. In addition, Budget will buy back the old copiers for a total of $28,000, of which $2,800 is for the SAU copiers. This public hearing is to authorize the SAU board to accept this revenue. These funds will be used to reduce costs associated with the copier equipment during the FY23 school year, mainly the lease. After FY23, we estimate there's a potential for an increase in the cost. The paper cut solution will encourage efficiency, which should realize savings, and we'll be providing our staff with up-to-date functioning equipment. And just to know, I've had lots of questions on copiers. To replace a copier to buy it outright is $11,000 to $12,000. So I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Facey? Mr. Glover.
It's from the public, Steve.
Oh, my apologies.
Yep.
Any members of the public that would like to ask a question? And then we have to close the public hearing. Thank you. Seeing no questions from the public, let's entertain a motion. Yes, sure. No, absolutely. So this is with regards to, great question. This is with regards to our public hearing to accept funds that the district received as a result of a reimbursement, or I guess you could say a prorated amount from our health insurance company. And now we're just trying to reallocate that to potentially purchase some new copiers. That's coming, probably in about 10 minutes. All right. So seeing no questions or comments from the public, let's go ahead and take a motion to close the public hearing. First by Ms. Parisi, seconded by Ms. Grund. All in favor to close the public hearing? That passes. And now let's open it up for board questions. Mr. Glover first, and then Ms. Grund. Ms. Grund.
So my question is, because I had just asked you like the cost of the annual lease payment for a copier.
For Sohegan.
For Sohegan. So
Yep.
for SAU, what does that look like? Because I mean, Sohegan, it looks like our annual cost is going to be $12,000, but a new copier costs $11,000 to $12,000. So we're going to be paying $12,000 a year versus $12,000 once plus maintenance fee. So I'm trying to understand why the lease is more affordable.
So that is just for one copier.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the lease is for all of them?
Yep.
Well, it's for all
Yep.
five, well,
For all five.
for
Yep.
So is it a similar cost for SAU then?
Yep.
Okay. And how
So
many?
we have 20 out of 24 of our copiers that are at or near end of life. So if you were to have to look to replace 20 copiers, that would be a huge capital expense. So this is allowing us to pay less and stretch out our payments. In addition, we have the $28,000 that is being applied to next year for FY23. And then you have the 4 years with the increased amount. So it's about $5,000 or so for Sohegan next year, which is less than what was
I wasn't
budgeted.
sure. I wasn't sure the 12,000 was for one. So I was wondering, like, in relation to the SAU cost, was it going to be similar? Like, how many copiers at the SAU?
I believe we're replacing 2. Yep, they all have different lease amounts.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Glover.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate you doing this work with the people who helped put all this together. I think at our meeting, you also said that you did an audit, and I've been just trying to digest this. I mean, this is unbudgeted new spending, and that's where I'm getting a little hung up, especially being in a default budget year. And this wasn't.
It's not unbudgeted new.
It's not unbudgeted. Well, this wasn't.
We budget for copiers.
Okay.
So this is replacing what we are spending now. So what was budgeted across all of the districts and was about $46,000, and this is about $12,500 more than that across all of the districts.
Right.
In addition, next year for FY23, we have a $28,000 buyback that will offset an increase in costs. So for budgeting purposes for next year, we're fine. For FY24, we'll need to look at the increased cost as far as a budget increase.
Right.
However, you're replacing 20 copiers that could be either need lots of service or need to be replaced at any point in time.
Right.
They've been around for a long time.
Yeah. Okay.
So next year, we're actually going to have most likely a savings because we have the $28,000. That's the whole point of the public hearings, to accept this revenue so that we can apply it to our copier costs for next year throughout all of the districts.
Right. Yeah, it sounds pretty reasonable, and I appreciate the work. I guess my recommendation would be that, it would have been nice to have this kind of foreseen, I guess, in budget season, something that probably has been on the horizon for a while, and maybe we're just getting caught on some stuff. So I'm not here to like wrap hands on the table or not. Just put the general concept that if we have these long-term needs for this equipment or other things, we should probably go ahead and add it to our capital maintenance programmatics and get it on a schedule. And to the extent you're doing that, keep doing that good work. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah, the process started early in the year, and it's taken a long time to get to this point. It's been probably 10 years since any business administrator really took a look at all of the copiers. So this was quite an undertaking for our whole office to try to get this done.
Great. Mr. Vayu.
Is you said $46,000 was actually budgeted?
That is the estimated cost of running the copiers across all of the districts.
So that $46,000 was intended to purchase or to purchase?
It's a variety. It's across all 3 districts and the SAU. That's about what it costs.
Is that the cost of putting toner and paper in them? Or
Yep,
is that
that's
actually cost of buying them?
That is what it is costing us now to run all of our copiers all across the district.
So will that be displaced by the lease agreement?
Yes.
Just wanted to be clear on that.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Just real quick, are we going to have a replacement schedule? Because we're doing 20.
Yep.
Instead of waiting 10 years to do 20.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a built-in replacement plan so that we replace 4 every other year or something? So we're always got fresh equipment in the building?
I would recommend that. We haven't gotten to the point of drafting our contract yet. We just have our proposal, but yes, I would recommend getting on a cycle so that we don't end up in this situation again. Because
Okay.
it was a real problem this year across all of the districts.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, there are 2 proposed motions in there. Ms. Vacy, are they both correct in terms of the verbiage and the dates?
So one should say FY22 and one should say FY23.
Perfect. Yep. So we're going to start off, actually, I'll entertain a motion to accept and expend $26,364.81 from the return of surplus from Health Trust. These funds shall be accepted into the general fund for fiscal year 2022. Anyone like to make that motion? Mr. Eckhoff?
I'll make that motion.
Second? Mr. Gauthier? Any discussion? Seeing none, let's call the vote. All in favor, please raise your hands. And none opposed, that vote passes. The next motion we'll entertain is to accept and expend $2,800 from the sale of the existing copier equipment. These funds shall be accepted into the general fund for fiscal year 23. To keep it simple, Mr. Eckhoff, you want to make that one again? Seconded by Mr. Gauthier. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's call the vote. All in favor, raise your hands. Seeing none opposed, that motion passes. Great, thank you. And let's move on to our regular business meeting. Pull that up. Awesome, it's 5:58. We're going to call to order our SAU meeting for Monday, May the 16th. Members of the public, I welcome you here tonight, so thank you for joining us. And we're actually going to start off with our first of 3 public comment periods. So this is your opportunity to address the board. Any issue that you'd like to talk about, just state your name, the town in which you reside. You'll have the floor for 3 minutes. You're just going to come up there, Judy, just because the microphone. Awesome. Yeah, we should put the easy one up there. There we go. Perfect.
And my name's Julie Smiley. I'm from Amherst, New Hampshire. I do have kids in the middle school and one in the high school. And I just wanted to encourage the board to keep the start times at the times they have been this past school year. We've seen huge benefits for our children. Previously, they were having to get up around 5:30 a.m. to get on a bus. That's too early for us, let alone the children who were simply unable to get enough sleep. I actually presented to the board a number of years ago regarding this topic, and there's a whole host of data supporting the fact that kids cannot get enough sleep with getting up at 5:30 a.m., particularly as they go into their teenage years. They are negatively impacted socially, emotionally, psychologically, and academically. I'd be happy to provide people with the data once again. I also would like to see us give this another chance in an actually more relatively normal school year. There's been so much upheaval. There's been bus driver shortages that's exacerbated the pickup times dramatically, and I think it's maybe caused people to look more unfavorably on the later start times, given the other factors that have also caused chaos this year. So that was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other members of the public? Awesome. Thank you. Please just state your name, town in which you reside. You'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Wendy Dupuy, and I live in Amherst. I'm also concerned with the issue of the start time. I just want you to know that the later start times came just in time for my younger daughter, who's a freshman this year. She would not do well if the start times were earlier. So it's been really beneficial for her and for my older daughter, who's a senior, so she's leaving. But the freshman especially, she just getting up early. She can't go to sleep earlier at night. So she had to go back to getting up at 5:30 every morning. She would really suffer for that and just basically go through her days exhausted. So.
Thank you. Seeing no other members of the public, first of all, thank you very much for coming in tonight. I always welcome members of the public and sharing your thoughts. It takes a lot to come up and stand in front of a public forum like that, so thank you. Let's move on to our consent agenda. There are 3 items that we were approving last week that we asked to continue to tonight. The minutes are still pending. Those we'll probably do in June. But the 3 budget transfers, before we adopt them, we can go into non-public to discuss them in more detail than the information that's provided, if people want to do so, because it does contain information that would have to be discussed in non-public. But if we're comfortable with the information that's been presented, we can approve those now. You're good? Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and take a motion to approve consent agenda item 1, 2, and 3. Great. Mr. Gothier first. Mr. White second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Great. Consent agenda items 1, 2, and 3 have been adopted. Mr. Chamberlain with our teacher effectiveness presentation.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's a couple of things. Teacher leader effectiveness, educator effectiveness is a system in place to evaluate, supervise, support our teaching staff. Significant work was done really up 14, 15, 16, 17 about developing and implementing teacher leader effectiveness work. My hope is to build on that, continue this work. I would like to make sure that everyone supports, and Christine and I and Adam talked about this, that this really is an area where we want to be consistent throughout the SAU. Having one teacher evaluator, MBVS, AMS, as well as Sauhegan, really having a system, whether it's Christine, me, superintendent, and how we're doing it, principals, so we can talk about it, we can provide the same professional development during orientation, things like that. We really do think that having this component, because I think there'll be some times, I think that's what we'll look at is when are we in SAU and when are we different districts. But in this case, I would like to reaffirm that this really is an area that the efficiencies and the way we go about educator effectiveness works SAU-wide. Because that does have tentacles as we start developing and continuing this work. We had some brief discussions, and Adam asked me to take a look at this early in the year. Things changed, and I didn't get a chance to reform the committee and get to work. One of the reasons why, and under Adam's direction, and I really believe, this year we really tried to limit the amount of time we take teachers out of the classroom. We really wanted to make sure the classroom was our priority, and so taking this work on would have been after school, and everybody was significantly committed during this time. But Christine and I are talking about summer priorities, and trying to get people together to do some of this work this summer is a perfect time. We don't lose class time, and we actually get a time to breathe and start focusing on it. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't engaged so far during the year. As I've reviewed and lived through the process, there's some things we'd like to just take a look at. And there's 6 listed, but I missed one of the biggest one, of course, because that's the type of week that I've had. But we're going to take a look at the evaluation timeline. Based on our current practice, we are in the next year. We are in the next year of evaluation. We turn about March or April, and is that so? Many school districts have a school year, and that's your year, but we actually encompass 2. Adam designed or influenced that process. One of the things I absolutely agree to make sure we have as much information on our new staff as possible. But there's implications to that. So let's just take a look at, from the practitioners, all the school administrators, how effective is that calendar, because it does rely on on implementing some observations this time of year, and that's very, very difficult. When you go into this time of year, you're building next year, you're ending this year, so adding that on. So I think we need to be purposeful and deliberate and take a look at the cycle. Are we a school year cycle? Are we a mid-year cycle? But I think that's important. The next piece would be kind of, I think, different. This is going to take some work to explain this to the faculty and staff, and it's a tiered approach to evaluation. And I'm a big proponent of the tiered approach, because it meets teachers where they're at. If you've had any conversation with me lately, I'm talking a lot about meeting kids where they're at. So this is meeting teachers where they're at. So there would be one stage, probationary. This is before continuing contact, and how we induct and how we observe and how we support those new teachers, and certainly focus about, as Adam has talked about, making sure those decisions are huge. But we want to, so we'd have a probationary stage. We'd also have a stage of teacher where the administration would be really a consultant with a very experienced teacher who's got real good designs on improvement. We all agree. So that would be the consultative stage. And then now we're getting into more improvement stage. And that the first stage of improvement is collaborative. That I sit down with a teacher and say, look, I think we need some work in the area of feedback. I've been in your classroom a lot. You're not, I rarely see you apply the research-based practice of getting feedback, amount of time, and the type. I'd really like you to focus on that. And that teacher says, oh, that's a great idea. I agree with you. Let's work on that. We do professional development. We do articles. We do observations. We're on board, and we are together. So that's collaborative. And the last stage is directive. And so say we did feedback for a year. We believe that's an evidence and a high leverage strategy. After a year, I'm hanging out with Chase, my son who's a new teacher. He hasn't implemented any of the practices. He kind of blew me off and said, you know what, I'm really concerned. Now it's directive. And I'm saying, this is what you will do for the next year. We try to get you on board, you didn't, but it's that important to me. And I want evidence of this at this stages. So we have probationary, consultative, collaborative, and directive. Frankly, if we do our jobs really well and develop those relationships and the trust and visibility, and hopefully earn a little bit of competence, and he does know what he's talking about, we very rarely get to the directive stage, but we need it there just in case. So that form of meeting teachers where they're at, consultative, probationary, collaborative, or directive. So that I would like to have some meaningful discussions with teachers all over the district, and start taking a look at that approach. The next piece, and this is really why we're changing it from teacher leader effectiveness to educator effectiveness, is to continue work on paraeducator evaluation in that system. Meg and Heather and others have done a great job, but I want to make sure that's unified throughout the SAU, the right instruments and tools, and certainly notices all through collective bargaining, all that fun stuff. But we all believe that every single employee in SAU 39, out of respect and honor, needs feedback on their performance each year to guide their improvement. And we have it in pockets, but I'm looking to more systems and consistency for our paraeducators. So that's why this is now educator effectiveness, because they'll be on the committee and all that fun stuff. So far, so good. Makes sense? The next piece is developing procedures for the implementation of improvement plans and growth plans. And why two names? Well, I work in 2 districts this year. One district we call it an improvement plan. One district we call it a growth plan. So I am looking together to develop some consistency. The piece is in how we can be deliberate and purposeful and support the improvement. And one of the things that I talk a lot about at both schools that I've worked at is, if we do this well, the most caring thing we can do is deliberately and purposefully support the improvement of teachers and support staff. My goal is to have them look at this as a caring practice. Wow, the administrator's willing to sit with me and develop this plan and guide this plan and put time in on observation, evaluation, designing very specific professional development activities. Wow, this administrator really cares about me, so I'm all in. That's the dream. It's not about this. It's about, wow, I can't believe I'm going to get that kind of support to excel here at SAU 39. Well, and that's not easy, because there's long histories in schools, right? You put on an improvement plan, it's really an exit plan, and that's not the gig. The gig is to work really hard with people to improve so they meet our expectations. And if we meet them where they're at and they trust us, I think we have a really good shot of raising the bar and level of support and competence for our staff. The next one, and this is consideration of peer observations and the work that Christine led in the past. It's sometimes called instructional rounds. but very, very important to me that teachers observe teachers. That if we have, if every teacher observes another teacher every year, in 3 years, my gosh, we'd have hundreds of observations. And when you get observed, you get ideas. But you know what? When someone comes into your classroom, Adam comes in and watches me do something, my game picks up, right? There's a little bit of that. So I hope that we can design and codify in this system. And one thing for probationary teachers, it really is compulsory that they need to learn the expectations and standards of this place. And so it really is about our probationary staff every year observing other teachers to understand that level. So hopefully that will be part of this work. And again, this really does take off on the work that was done in the past. And the next one is what do people believe in the role of self-reflection? There is a strong practice about reflecting after each PD activity, but hopefully each year that we're reflecting on their practice, or at least, for their recertification or the credentialing cycle. Self-reflection is an evidence-based practice. If you think about and reflect about what you do, your practices increase. And so this is about instilling research and evidence-based practices. And so requiring self-reflection before you get certified. It's credentialed. Before you get credentialed, Christine's going to laugh at me. Before you get credentialed, you submit a reflection about what my last 3-year professional development work impacted student learning by. That's the prompt, and you reflect on that. And going forward, my next set of professional development activities will impact student learning by. That act of reflection increases the quality, increases the connection to their work, and hopefully increases their effort and energy to it. So how can we compel, require, encourage, whatever the word is, but self-reflection is a meaningful part of their evaluation process. It is a research evidence-based practice. And the last one, and I apologize, because it really is the most important one, but that's the way it's been. And I've had an opportunity to talk with a couple of boards about this during the nomination process, and that is the summative evaluation process. Right now, the evaluation process is a mandatory clinical, pre-observation, observation, and post. But there isn't an opportunity right now, and I get it, because it's an unbelievable amount of work, and we want to make sure it is putting time in the right place. But at least for those cusp, I call the cusp on continuing contract. For those who are going from continuing, making that continuing contract decision, we had to work this together, but I cannot imagine that I could support the next iteration of educator effectiveness without, at a minimum, requiring a summative evaluation for the cuspers in writing, great strengths, contributions to the building, to the SAU, as well as areas for growth. We have to have something in writing. We have to have the reflection by an administrator, and it's got to be signed out. But also, it may be, and depending on the work, because it's all going to be manageable. This is an area, what we say we're going to do, we have to do. This isn't, we're going to observe every teacher 3 times and we do 1. That we lose credibility. And the system has to be manageable and feasible. And that's why I completely understand. To be honest with you, I don't think we have the person power or the way that this place is run that Adam could, Christine could, and says, look, I want a summative evaluation every teacher every year. I don't think we could do that with fidelity and efficacy to get value. But I do believe, and I really think we need to require summative evaluation anyone that we're making continuing contract decision at the minimum. And if teachers are whether they're in collaborative or directed improvement plans, yes. But I lived in a world where I did a summative evaluation on every single teacher every year. And it was hard. And one of the things, why I'm not advocating that so strongly tonight, because I did all that work and I saw people look at it, sign it, hand it back without having a meaningful impact. So those are some areas that we look at. Really this integration or this type of work integrating in all the districts really begins tomorrow as I describe some of this to one of the governing bodies at SAU. But this helps me say, yep, Steve, we're all in. It's going to be consistent throughout the SAU. And these type of items are worthy of discussion and working with teachers, administrators, and board members who joined this work over the summer. I don't know if I missed anything.
I'm sure there's going to be a ton of questions.
Can you just describe the role of domain leader as it applies to this process?
Sure. So The domain leader currently is a level of support. It's a hybrid position at Sauhegan High School, which they teach a couple of blocks, and they also serve as administrative role. In the plan that was reviewed by Mike, Dana, Christine, and Adam, they are supporting the evaluation process of teachers at the probationary, at the consultative, and at the collaborative stage. Certainly the emphasis on, and hopefully I provided enough focus on, it is relationships, right? The way we're going to move teachers is with relationships and trust. But when we get into directive, I don't like this, but it's heavy, right? It's serious. And so that we really think is a principal, dean of faculty type action and not the domain leader type action. The domain leader really is the support. Now, to be completely honest, if I was a math teacher that was in a process of a directed improvement plan, what I've observed and what I've seen, there isn't anybody I'd want more to help me improve than Ann Swift. But I'm a rare bird, and I understand that. We have a lot of trust and all that fun stuff to do. So at the meantime, at the first year of implementation or first two, I'm completely fine with collaborative, consultative, and probationary. But it is the art and on how, and this is how Adam talks about, and I look forward to more, how do you move people? Adam hired me without question to move people. He did not hire me to sit around and just boom. He said, you got to work with building administrators, you got to move them. And he provided me a lot of time working with the secondary schools. And hopefully I moved them through visibility, credibility, competence, passion, insight, relationships, trust. And actually John's here. John can say, he hasn't moved me. So I'm just kidding. But that's what I hope. But fundamentally, if John, Bethany, Dana, Kelly's here tonight, if they don't trust me, they don't see me as competent and someone who actually is thoughtful on the stuff, I can't move people. But ultimately, it's a relationship I have with them. And I get that. And we are not going to move people simply because you put on a directive plan. We're going to move people because we show how much we care about the student experience, and we have the competence and passion and energy and skill to provide them with what's necessary to improve. That's what I believe. I'm sticking with it.
Thank you.
100%.
Ms. Lawrence.
Is there room in this model for students to be part of the evaluation process and also for parents to be part of that?
Great question, and we'll add that on the list just to bring to the committee. Yes, so absolutely for consideration and see how we do student as well. I have, to be completely frank, I've seen it implemented very well and also very poorly. But Sarah, it is absolutely thank you, and it will be put on the list for items to discuss with the squadron.
Thank you.
Thank you. Notice I said squadron. That was for you.
That was for me.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Ms. Goulet-Zimmer.
So to follow up, because I'm not sure I understood entirely your answer on the domain leader question. So would they be doing the reviews for those probationary, consultative, and collaborative, or would they just be involved in their reviews, but there's someone else within the administration at the high school who would be doing the reviews?
Gotcha. Thank you. So we have guidelines on how many evaluations and what, like new teachers versus continuing, non-continuing teachers and continuing contract teachers. We have a value on the number of times we need to visit classrooms. So we could not meet, do what I say we're going to do with this area. We could not meet those requirements unless the domain leaders participate in going into classrooms and writing up evaluation. Could not be done. Okay. So they're going, and I believe that especially in areas of their expertise, we get a great return on that time. So yes, they're going to be doing them, but let's say they walk into my classroom and it was mediocre at best. And they write it up, and then another one walks up, and the way it was done at Sauhegan, which was extraordinarily well done this year, was there were sometimes monthly, sometimes bi-weekly meetings of the evaluation group. We watched videos for interrater reliability. We had discussions. We brought in case studies. It was about as good a professional learning community on this area that I've ever seen. So when that happens again, I've been in Steve's classroom, and it's been mediocre at best. Now, Dana, I think you need to get in there. So now it's risen to the level. Now it's up to the dean of faculty. And Mike, I think you really need to get in, Steve. I've done all I can, but I really need to. And then they get in there. Now it's four evaluations on a news. and I'm just not cutting it. Then everybody gets together and says, I think Steve really needs some purposeful help. Let's try a collaborative plan. And they come in and sit down with me, Steve, your class, your kids, we did a study, 47% of the time the kids were on their phone playing music or video game. You're clueless on what's going on in your class. They'll probably be nicer, but that's what I'd say. And then, so these are the strategies we want to use. I'd say, oh, I'm so sorry. I really would say that, by the way. I'm not, I was, oh my gosh, I'd be horrified by that. And they'd work with me to develop some strategies, right, to do that. So they would do once it got to be a place where we think it's going to require more direct support, it moves to the dean of faculty. But as far as taking, the first level of data collection, yes, we need as many people as we can because the requirements are so important. And one of the things Adam and I, our very first time Adam and I ever talked about this stuff, the way you move teachers is be in the classrooms.
I mean, at some point at the end of that process, even at the lower levels, though, are they getting told, I don't know, this is what you're doing well, this is the results of everything?
Yes.
And is that coming from someone other than just the domain leader? I guess, do they realize there's a whole group of people involved, and is there someone other than just the domain leaders at
Yes.
the 3 levels who are?
So this year there were 7 different people, including me, or 8 different people that visited classrooms. Adam asked me to take a special look at math. I'm a math teacher for a little bit, so I did all the math, did all world language. But so everybody's observing everybody.
Okay.
So there wasn't anybody, well, Mike's not here, he can't. Who's going to know? No, I'm just kidding. I don't believe there was anybody who were only observed by just a domain lead.
Okay.
But if I'm wrong, I promise you it's a rare exception.
Okay.
And it wasn't by design. It's just a lot of classroom visit. The people who were here all year for the Sauhegan board, over 200-300 observations, which is unbelievable. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
That did. Thank
All right.
you. When were they last reviewed? Can I ask that before I?
Yeah, I was many of us, we were in a room where teachers said the first time in 20 years was evaluated this year.
That's what I understand.
And there was board members in that room. Christy's not here, right? Wasn't that PPC? Yeah. So they can't say that now.
No, I appreciate the work that's been done on that. I really do.
And that's not me. That's Dan. I'm just hanging out.
Mr. Conklin.
So I do appreciate the work. I think this is all good, and I think aligning is always a good plan. One question I had, I definitely support peer observation. Obviously, that takes time for teachers to do. And so how do we support teachers in giving them the space to do that peer observation work so they don't feel like they have to leave their classroom for extended periods or in filling out more forms? So how do we support teachers through that process?
Great question. And something Christine, Adam, and I have talked about, the amount of planning time at I'm a huge proponent of planning time. When you provide the time necessary, if you believe you provide teachers the time, then you can raise the expectations on the classroom. It is very difficult without that equation. And there is a wide variety of planning time throughout the SAU. From elementary all the way to Sauhegan. And that's something we have to look at. If we really want, and Adam knows in my language, magnificence, if we want every classroom, every class period to be something extraordinary, then planning time has something to do with it. In the meantime, a couple of things, some mechanic things we can do. Administrators there are times that we can jump into a classroom to help them go out. They do have planning time to do it. We can jump in. And I think we have to value it and we have to honor it. One of the things that I did to change the culture my last time was an internal contest. And Adam and I talked about this, that if you observe another teacher, you get 2 points. If you get observed, you get 1 point. And the ones with the most points would get a dinner served by Adam Steele and Steve Chamberlain. We talked about that. So a little bit of fun, but value it. And I really think most teachers like to be observed by their colleagues. But planning time, Josh, I am not content with the amount of planning time provided our teachers in SAU 39. I'm not.
Ms. Parisi.
Follow up to your planning time. Do you have some ideas that you're going to be working on and thinking about over the summer so that we can make that planning time most effective?
Yes.
Okay.
And Christine and I we actually went in my little office today. We're usually at her big office, my little office. And one of the things that we just pounding each other on, what are the priorities? What are the priorities? You'll hear me say that all the time. What are the priorities? What are the highest leverage, right? Highest return. Looking at planning time is a priority. And then we have a couple others. But yes, the summer will be important for the institution of planning time.
Thank you. Ms. Clark.
Does it want to turn on? It does. So I really appreciate what you said about ensuring that is it summative reports, that they're really sincere and meaningful. And I totally agree, like quality over quantity on those,
Thank you.
especially if you're trying to create a shift in the culture. Because what I'm hearing is you're really trying to move the culture towards seeing this as a growth opportunity instead of a punitive,
Right.
predetermined
100%.
exit strategy. So part of that is, have you really had a chance to look at what tools you have towards that kind of cultural shift? Like I know there's the climate survey that's going on right now. That seems like a data point that could be utilized towards that. Like, have you thought about kind of what resources you have towards that?
No, thank you. That's, we have at the secondary schools, we have worked on implementing improvement/growth plans this year. And during that process, I was made keenly aware of the history and where we're starting from. So I think I understand what the current culture is by talking with lots of teachers. And hopefully they will understand where we're coming from in the next iteration. But taking a look at the climate survey and trust and all that, all that, which is very meaningful. But I've been very privileged to have lots of, I think, what I would open and frank conversation with lots of teachers. And specifically when actually John and I tried to we worked hard to support a teacher improvement. And the teachers were pretty open and honest about the culture and the past history for those who've been on improvement plans. So we're trying to change the world.
Thank you. Sure.
It made me think about this, our community really wants transparency from us. And that also is not something that is disagreed with by faculty, like teachers and other educators, right? They want transparency. So I don't know if that's already part of the practices with the climate surveys and whatnot, that there's transparency in the process of, we own that this is feedback that we're getting, that we need to make our change on, see like modeling that growth mindset. I know, like, I appreciate that in my educational environment, the transparency of owning opportunities and giving evidence towards improvement. Sometimes that also helps lead the way to cultural shift.
Thank you. I'm right with you. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how we can build that trust and confidence in that we're okay talking about this as an area of growth. I hope that actually, Christy and I talked about the book today, Carol Dweck's Growth Mindset, and because it was such a foundation book for me in the work that went, we use that as a foundation text to support improvement work. And I actually talked with Christine about that. Should we do that here? And I know it's been done in pockets, but for me, it changed. That work changed how I parent, changed how I lead, changed everything. It changed everything. And it really had a profound impact on one of my children. So I hope we can get there. I hope we can, let's talk about growth and getting better every day. I've had a couple of conversations. I do a lot of side conversations in my gig. And deliberate and purposeful, loud, everywhere we can, we are devoted to continual improvement. It's not in enough documentation in SAU 39. There are some areas where there's real important documentation about what the 6 things we believe in or this believe in. I want it loud and clear. If you're jumping on to the SAU 39 bandwagon, then we believe in every day we get better. I try to be a better superintendent, better dad, better husband, better grad student. Every day I try to get better in my life. And that's it. That's what we do. The kids deserve us to get better every day. And I want to say it loud. I want to have it in documentation that you jump on SAU 39, that you are joining a group to get better every day. And if you're not into it, it's not a fit. And to be honest, and all the people I tried to hire in my last gig, I had someone call me next day, Steve, what you want from me, I cannot give you. I cannot join Hopkins School District. And I said, thank you. If you're not into continual improvement, trying to get better every day, doesn't meet our values, right? Anyway, I'm sticking with that too.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Grunt for number 2.
So it's not a question, but it's more of a thank you. Thank you for taking this lead and this charge. I think it's been needed for a while, and you have my full support on working forward. And I think our teachers are looking for a change in this area too. When you start talking about changing culture, that's hard. but over time and, you know, you build the trust, we'll get there. We'll get there together. So thank you for taking this on.
No, my pleasure. And please note Christine, and I think it goes back to Nicole too, doesn't it? It goes back, really the foundation was laid. This is the next iteration with a little bit of stuff. But no, I think it's fertile ground, and I think we can get moving on this summer.
Thank you. Mr. Glover.
Just a quick comment. It's a lot of this, at least from the Sauhegan level, sounds like going back to roots. I think there was a lot of growth mindset at the genesis of Sauhegan. Teacher-driven policy, teacher-driven effectiveness in the classroom, teacher-driven work days and planning time, and all of that stuff is at the core of where this began. It's gotten astray of that over the last 30 years. So I think some of this, for people who've been here a long time, will sound very familiar. And I don't know that it'd be such a lift culturally if you remind people of that sometime.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So we do have a proposed board action here to make a motion to support the continuing educator effectiveness as an SAU-wide initiative and priority for the 2022-2023 school year. Motion by Mr. White, seconded by Ms. Parisi. Any discussion? Mr. Conklin.
So I'm in full support of the motion. I'm just wondering if there's any other actual action that would be helpful from the board in terms of if you're generating things, anything you need.
I think Victoria's already going to be on the committee, right?
All right.
I really dropped this. You guys really should write that up in my evaluation.
Very good.
I think we already got a board wrap.
That's good.
Right?
That's all we need.
I think there's a couple.
Yeah, I think Christy Peters.
Christy too. Mucho grazie. Sorry about that.
Great. Seeing no further discussion, let's call the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. And thanks, Terry. It's unanimous. So Danae, thank you. All right, let's move on to the next item on our agenda. Our school start times. And is that Mr. Steele or?
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So school start times is a topic of conversation that's been around for a number of years. As everyone knows, we changed our school start times for this school year. And this board asked for a recommendation for us about what to do for next school year. I won't bury the lead. Our recommendation is that we maintain the current start and end times for next school year for a couple of reasons and with a couple of caveats. First and most importantly, May and June is the wrong time to prepare parents for another school start time change for next school year. That is not enough lead time for many parents to make their plans for their kids before and after school. So that's an important component for why we want to maintain the current start and end times. The second reason is we do believe there needs to be more study about our school start and end times. And the challenge would be if through that study we determine that there's a better model, a better set of start and end times, a better plan moving forward, what that would mean for parents and for our students and for our staff is that we had a set of start and end times. We switched to a different set of start and end times. We went back to an original set of start and end times and then moved to a third set sometime in the fourth year. So there'd be 4 changes in a row for our parents, staff, and students who are just coming out of the pandemic that altered everything as well. And so while we think there needs to be more study, we don't want to move back to our original start and end times while looking at potential other options. The third reason is we know that we can do better in 2 areas, and those 2 areas are athletics and transportation. So we have our 2 athletic representatives tonight, Kelly Braley, our athletic director from Sauhegan. John Schuttinger is representing Amherst Middle School in this discussion, and they're here to answer questions and add to the discussion if we have them about athletics. But we know that we can do better in our scheduling of athletics. What you may not know is that most of our athletic events are scheduled sometimes often 2 years in advance. So when they go through the scheduling process, they schedule for the ensuing year and for the year after that year. And often it takes 2 years to cycle through those changes. And so Kelly at the high school did what changes she could put in place for this current year. And there'll be we think even better things that will happen next year. And she can talk about that if you have questions about it. Same thing for Amherst Middle School and the Tri-County League, working to make sure that athletics isn't the disruption for students that it has been. Because this year it has. It's really, for some kids that are in away games for specific sports, some of them have been hit particularly hard because of athletics, and that can't happen. We're also looking into our high school schedule because there's some anomalies in our high school schedule in particular where a lot of science labs are happening all in the afternoon. And we know that's something that we can look at to potentially ameliorate and make sure so that kids aren't always missing science labs to go play their athletic events, because it's a disproportionate number of things. Bus transportation, we have limited options about what we can do to improve that. Christine has offered to live at the bus terminal over the summer and work on routes, and there's a strong possibility that will happen. But we know we can continue to make better on our bus routes. We know that little kids take more time getting on and off buses than older kids, and that's one of the reasons why the bus routes this year have been so challenging. But the biggest issue has really been around staffing of our bus routes. That has been by far the thing that has been the biggest impact. So for all of those reasons, our recommendation tonight is that we maintain. We talked as a senior leadership team quite a bit, and we were going to recommend a committee that looks to study this issue and then make recommendations. And thankfully, this gentleman to my right said, wait a minute, we don't need to have a committee yet. We need to go through the process and look at what we can do as an administration to improve the things that we have control over, transportation, athletics, high school schedule, et cetera, and then circle back and make a recommendation if we need to make changes down the road. And so our recommendation is no committee quite yet. See how the start of the school year goes. You can't use September as a gauge, but by the time you get to Columbus Day, and for sure by Thanksgiving, this board and administration will have more than enough data to know, do these school start and end times actually work? Do we need to go in an entirely different direction, and give you plenty of time to make a decision in time to warn parents in the early winter and by spring at the absolute latest about what changes you might make for the ensuing school year. So, I miss anything? No. Okay. So that's our recommendation for now, is the status quo.
Great. John and Kelly, if you don't mind, can I ask you guys to come up to the table here? We'll get you a microphone. No, I've got some questions, and I'm sure some other people do as well. Thank you, guys. Let's open it up for questions first. Mr. Gothier.
So my initial question is, we're going to look at potentially a third alternative to this. So we have last year's times, this year's times. There's an alternative. When does that study take place? If we need to let parents start to know in January, in February, there's no time to do a committee in there. So my concern is that we're stuck with these times for at least one more year after this year. So we're talking about in the 24-25 school year before we can make a change again. And I think parents that, especially in the elementary school level, you look at some of the responses from the surveys we did back in January, February timeframe, that is going to be very stressful for them. And again, much like it is for the high school parents and kids where it's less stressful, but I think that the negative reaction we've seen has outweighed the positive. So it's a different conversation point. But what is the alternative? What is this third option that might exist out there? Do we have?
I'm not sure that there is one. When we looked at this for 4 years, but the thing that was universally supported, except for the fact that you had to almost double your bus fleet, was having a single start and end time throughout both our towns. That was by far, in a way, the best for athletics, for parents, for academics, for everything. But it doesn't make sense. We can't afford to have twice the number of bus routes, nor can we find twice as many bus drivers. That's not possible. So for that reason, we're doing the best we can in a two-tier system. I'm not sure there's a better way besides moving things slightly earlier, slightly later, and making small adjustments to the current model, or going back to the original. So I don't think it's like a third completely different. There are no different creative options that exist. It would be tweaks to the current model or tweaks to the pre-existing model.
Thank you. Ms. Grunt.
So, I mean, I've been probably one of the most vocal about this, and to be honest, it's not about just the start times. It's the amount of education hours that we don't have at Sohegan. When we made the start time change, we lost a few, 20 minutes? And then we put in 8-period schedule where every class basically went down by another 10 minutes. So literally our core classes, if you think about it, lost 30 minutes of teaching time in various ways. And I'm worried, then we learned the kids are leaving. I had one teacher tell me that when there were certain kids, when she had them Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the block schedule, and they were out Monday and Friday, she saw them once in a science class, once. And we wonder why our New Hampshire SAS science looks terrible. Our kids aren't in class. That's my issue, is that we don't have the education hours. So I think we need to look at that model of how do we get the hours back in the classroom. So yeah, it has to do with athletics. If you look at the comments from teachers, was it 2/3 of the teachers were not in favor of the start time? So we need to look at the actual comments, not just the numbers. We got to look at the actual comments of why, because I think that makes a difference. But yeah, for me, it's really about the lost education minutes in the classroom. It's hurt us tremendously. So that needs looked on. No matter whether we switch start times or not, we need to put those minutes back in.
We did, if you remember, we did add 5 days back to the calendar for Sohegan. So they make up all of their snow days now. And 5 days does make a difference, but you're right, on the daily basis, the minutes have gone down, no doubt about it.
So if I can just pose a question to you, Kelly, what steps are you taking as the AD then to sort of kind of wrap this all up better, right? So we know what happened this year based on last year, and
Yep.
clearly not a planning.
Yeah, so next year does start a new cycle. So next year's schedule will be the schedule for 2 years with home and aways flipped. So the most accessible thing I can do is push all of our start times to 4:30. There are caveats with that. The main one being the amount of times that sub-varsity level teams will lose, primarily in the fall. Once you get into mid and late October, the sun sets at 5:45. If you're not starting a varsity game until 4:30, which has to start first because that's the one that has to get in and played, your JV games aren't going to happen, which is going to limit opportunity for kids, and then will have an impact on our programs as a whole down the road. But I mean, we're student athletes. Student has to come first. I'm all for that. So 4:30 is what we'll do. You know, if we look at that and say, you know, maybe towards the end of the season we can start, you know, pushing those games a little bit earlier to at least maybe get a half of a JV in to give those opportunities. You know, we can make those decisions down the road, but I think the most accessible thing is 4:30. And again, as Adam said, that depends heavily on what the busing situation is. There have been several times this year where I've gotten the call, hey, can we drop you off a half hour early because I need a route driver to do it. So they've got to drop you off to be able to get back to take the route, and then they'll come back and pick you up later. So, you know, from my end, all of our opponents know we will not, you know, we won't start games earlier than 4:30 unless there's like a really compelling reason to do so, which will hopefully put, you know, an extra 30 minutes of time back in for our kids. Other options could include looking at, in the situations where we can play a JV game first, followed by a varsity, just having JV be the team that gets dismissed early, and looking at alternative modes of transportation for varsity so that they don't have to go on the early bus and sit there through the JV game when they could be having that time back in class. Obviously, we can't go and double our bus our bus budget or find those extra drivers, but if it's late enough, there might be some alternative methods to get them there, including, you know, the van that we're still excited to get soon, hopefully. So there are other things that we can do, but until that piece is a reality, I can't count on it.
But that's really only an impact for the fall sports, because by the time spring comes, your schedule generally it's getting lighter and your seasons are a little bit shorter. It's only
Correct.
7 weeks. Is there a way to shorten that fall season? I know we've shortened baseball season, we've shortened basketball season.
So by shorten, we've taken away some time. Basketball is not set for next year. The committee is actually
They were like a month early this year, right?
Yeah, so it went back to the council, and they're meeting on the 19th to decide whether or not it's going to stick. Right now, it's probably going to extend a little bit. I don't think they're going to stick with the shortened season the way it was this year. That said, they shortened the season. They didn't take away games.
No, correct.
So,
but I'm saying if you truncate games in the fall, sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to, but it's
okay.
follow up to this. If you truncate a 12-week schedule for not lacrosse, it's what, field hockey?
Yeah, and football.
And football.
So
football you really can't do much with because you play every week. You can't do double games, but other sports you can play.
Fall is already the shortest season. So like field hockey, for example, only plays 14 games. Every other sport plays at least 16 or 18, including winter and spring. So, and remember, 2 weeks of the fall season is before school even starts. And they have moved games earlier. So the first date to compete now is August 26th, which is the earliest it's ever been. So we'll have a full week and a half of games before school even starts. So that'll alleviate a little bit. And then hopefully in the spring, because you're right, it is lighter later. So those 4:30 starts are helpful. And where you're offset with like JV baseball, softball from varsity. They're playing at the same time, just different locations. So you don't run into the same issue of like JV can't play after varsity because that's a non-issue.
And Kelly, my follow-up real fast is real estate management, right? And so managing the properties with lights. Is there an opportunity to go ahead and get rental lighting for some of these events for the course of like 2 hours?
So home games aren't the issue, right? It's the away games.
Well, that's my point, right? And so real estate management, as you're talking to, I'm going to make this up, Timbuktu School out in Rockingham County, where we got to travel out there for. Game starts at 4:30, working with them to say, hey, we're going to be going late. Can we get some lights?
Are we covering that cost or are they? That'll be the first question I'm getting asked.
Well,
because like it's not like to rent the lights is not, it's not an inexpensive.
But when we set the schedule, we can make those arrangements in advance to say, hey, we're looking for a property with lighting, so we're going to be starting at XYZ time. Are those conversations happening or?
No, I haven't had any of those conversations yet. There are very few and far between schools that have stadiums with lights.
Okay.
But I'm certainly willing to explore that and see how many would be willing to look into that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Zimmer.
Yes. So I guess a follow up on that, I had kids that did cross country, or my daughter did cross country at both the middle school and 1 year at the high school, and field hockey. And I mean, certainly cross country, you can't play obviously under the lights. And a lot of these, and like cross country, you're getting many schools together. I mean, these are meets. And same with the track teams. I mean, these are meets with multiple different schools. Is it a problem? I mean, is it a problem getting them to shift? Are we running into issues with the other schools being resistant to the later time?
It depends on the school. Most in our division are really flexible. I'm very lucky in that the ADs in like that I get to work with every day are just really wonderful people. So they get it. They're in it with us. They understand. So no, that's not so much the issue, but with those larger meet situations, I mean, for us here, it's easy because we have lights. We do the throwing events first, and then if we have to run later, we throw the lights on and we can run later. Cross country seems to have it, down pretty well where they can release people in heats, maybe 30 to 45 seconds apart. You're not clogging trails and so on and so forth. So scheduling wise, the larger meets are only an issue when you do have one school in there where it's a hiccup, but the general rule of thumb is that the home school gets to set the time. So if I can get in touch with the home school and say, hey, we really need this, and they can change it, great. And if they can't, then we drop and I go find someone who can accommodate us.
Okay. Because I'll say generally, can I do a follow-up? I mean, I've when my kids were little, they were up way earlier than they were when they were in high school. And I think there's a lot of things about this that make sense, even though there were a lot of kind of growing pains at the beginning of the year and problems with the buses. I'm assuming, are our buses just full? Are they just full packed? We cannot add more students to the buses?
No, that's not the issue with buses.
Or is the issue that we don't want the high schoolers and the middle schoolers traveling with the younger kids?
That's not an issue either. We're comfortable with middle schoolers and high schoolers with elementary kids. It's just that the issue with buses is how long it takes to get from one end of our town to the other twice.
Yeah, so why do we have to do twice? Like, why can't we, front of the bus is the littler kids, back of the bus? I mean, I understand maybe we don't want the kindergartners sitting with the high schoolers, but I mean, why did we rule out we can't all start at the same time?
When we did the numbers and we ran through the actual ridership of buses at the time, it wouldn't require a doubling of our fleet, but about a 2/3 addition of number of buses based on the ridership.
Pretty full.
But some buses
are full, but pretty full.
Yes. I will tell you that was pre-COVID, and the patterns are different now, both with the different start times and after COVID. There's different types of parents driving their kids to school for both of those reasons. It used to be pre-COVID, there were even more parents at AMS because they wanted their kids to sleep in an extra 20 minutes and not have to take the bus and get to school a little bit later. Now there's still a lot of cars at AMS post-COVID, and we think it's because some parents don't want their kids riding the bus. So we don't have a clear. I can't tell you I've got that the same numbers are true now.
Yeah.
There's some factors that have changed since we did that analysis.
Okay.
But the time was 2/3. I'm looking at you. You didn't do it, but yeah.
I share the concern about the loss of the education, the education time. I mean, my daughter, who's the high schooler about to graduate, would absolutely say the later time was way better for her. But I'm really, really concerned I mean, even when with the earlier times, it seemed like there was a lot of time missed, like when she did field hockey her freshman year.
Correct.
And I don't know what the options are. I don't know if if the schedule can be worked so as much as possible. If there's a free period, it's the end of the day, and that's the planning time for teachers. I don't know what options are out there, but if it's going to stay the way it is, we've got to find a way to fix that piece.
I agree.
So.
Ms. Parisi.
I was just going to say that I commend leadership for coming to us and telling us that you can figure out some things within our schools and how you're going to be able to make this work for the year and how you're going to see some improvement. I appreciate our representatives talking about our sports. I appreciate hearing how much time we need in the classroom for our students, for the academic piece of it. And it goes, for me, it goes back to relying on our administration to tell us, to run the day-to-day and to tell us that this is what they believe that we can do for our district and what's best for kids.
Thank you. Mr. Eckhoff.
I just want a couple thoughts for you because I appreciate what you're up against scheduling, and I'm a big sports fan. I think it's key to a great education. How many games can you push into Saturday from a weekday schedule? It's going to give you bus drivers. Some parents may not like it, but it also is going to open up sports fields and playing time. So I don't know how many games you can push in, and maybe you're already doing that. I don't know, but maybe pushing games into weekends. And another maybe reach goal is, could you block out a day every week that you're just not going to play any sports, and you rotate the days so that you don't have kids missing the same classes all the time? So week number 1, we're not playing sports on Monday. Week number 2, it goes to Tuesday. And I know that complicates it for you, and you may get some, are you crazy on the other end of the phone, but just a thought.
Yeah, the Saturday piece is definitely one that has been explored, and we'll continue to look at those things. Again, the tough pieces of it are, yeah, I mean, here's a great example. We share all of our fields with the town, and allowing them, and encouraging our youth to come in and use our facilities and encouraging our teams to be a part of it. So one thing, but I mean, does that mean we can't have an hour and a half or 2-hour game on our field? No, we can. There's still time and room for all of those things. I've done a lot of reading about kind of best practices and what's best for kids and families around that. And it's tough. It's a good split. I mean, having kids look to go, 5-6 days a week sometimes, and asking that of families is a bit challenging. But then, there are so many benefits, like you said as well. Like it frees up a little bit more time during the week. Maybe even adds another practice day. They're not stressing so much there. So it's split. But Saturdays are definitely a look. We have pushed, I believe off the top of my head, it's 2 or 3 football games away. Plymouth will be on a Saturday, so that we're not, going that far on a weekday. And Hillsborough is on a Saturday as well. So again, not super far, but a decent enough chunk where hopefully that helps a bit. But yeah, definitely the 1 day off a week. I like that thought, and I want to figure out if that's a real possibility. Officials availability is the first thing that kind of comes to my brain on that, and making sure that we can get the people to facilitate a safe game for our students. But that's definitely worth exploring. Thanks for that.
Thank you. We're going to go to Mr. White and then over to you, Terry.
Yeah, first, thank everyone who's put time and thought into this. I feel like this is a very tricky, I don't want to say no-win situation, but almost a no-win situation, especially when you look at the data, right? The younger grades clearly want to go back, and the older grades clearly like sleeping in a little bit later. So no matter what is decided, there's going to be some irritated population, to put it, mildly. So obviously I'm on the Amherst School Board, so obviously I tend more towards the younger group, but we have to be collaborative and understand the whole broad picture and everything that we're up against. And obviously, as Superintendent Steele's already said, ideally we would have everybody start and end at the same time, but logistically and financially that's just not possible. So I guess I would really like to see, and I think I do agree with Tom. I don't see if we stay pat how we're going to change it next year. I think it's going to end up being like a 2-year thing, especially if you're saying, right, you're just starting the new. I don't know if I'm understanding correctly, right? You just started the new scheduling cycle.
Fall will start the new cycle, so it'll be a 2-year.
So it'd be 2 years.
Mhm.
So if we, let's say next year switch, then we're making your life more challenging.
I can pick up a phone and call people and switch if we need to. That's not a.
That wouldn't
Yeah,
be that
whatever.
wouldn't be that much of an.
I mean this with all of myself. Whatever is going to be what's best for kids,
Yeah.
we'll figure out.
Yeah, because I guess what
Athletics work for them.
and I just want to make sure I'm hearing correctly, because part of my concern, because I'm with Mr. Eckhoff, certainly I love sports, grew up playing sports. I think it's, helps kids. I think they learn lots, and there's lots of value to playing athletics. And they also learn a lot in the classroom. So I'm a little bit concerned when I hear that JV and, would be impacted, might miss out on opportunities. That worries me a little bit. I'm not saying it's your fault. I mean,
Me too. Believe me.
Because I also think it weakens our varsity programs, right? And it's a long-term effect. If they don't have the practice, they don't have those opportunities to shine and challenge and develop resiliency and develop growth mindset. Those are all things that they learn in the athletic arena. So I guess that's a long way of saying I really hope that this is. I understand the administrations want to stay as is, but I really hope this is something that we can start doing sooner rather than later to figure out if there's a tweaks possible best solution. And obviously part of that will be finding out if our ridership is going to be permanently changed or temporarily changed.
Great, thank you. Ms. Beam and then Mr. Vega.
Good night. First off, you are my shiro. I know that it is in the best of circumstances, it is a really, really difficult logistical issue, right? To get all of everybody where they need to be. When you add in different times, transportation not being available, and just everything else we've thrown at you, thank you. And thank you for being willing to just put the work in to do whatever's best for kids. John, I hope that AMS works a little bit closer with Kelly, because I feel like perhaps she's had a little more success this year than we have. And I'm just going to be honest, right? I think that we've got some lessons learned, that we've realized, oh wait, away team, you can't come in the middle of dismissal. That's really disruptive. You can't block our buses. That really sucks, right? You can't, sorry, you just can't be here yet. You're not allowed on campus until. Hey team, you're probably going to have to change on the bus, whatever. We have some tweaks that we can learn some best practices from each other. And I think that we should always be doing that anyway. We should always be benchmarking. I think there are some real positives that have not been mentioned. We have been able to do things after school at our younger grades that we were not doing before, and they've been very popular. We would like to expand them, and they've been phenomenally well received by families. I think we've had older kids who've had families able to attend their games that couldn't before, because guess what? A lot of us have full-time jobs, and it's really hard to get there for a 3:00 game and say, sorry, boss, I'll make it up tonight. Sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't. So there are some real benefits that we have not talked about. The half hour that we have, at first, I was really worried about it. I won't lie. The half hour here before the buses roll for the high school students, I was like, ooh, you got a lot of kids wandering around with time in their hands. Guess what? They're using that time to try out clubs. They're using that time to get help from their teachers. They're using that time to socialize with their friends without having, because they don't drive yet, some of the younger kids. And so I have a sophomore, she uses that time, and her friends use that time in a really productive way. Maybe not every day, but it's been a time that's worked well for them. So I think that to look only at the challenges and not at some of the successes here is really not looking at the total picture. And that's not just because I was a proponent for this, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there are no challenges. There are challenges, and there are things we can learn. But I also think that one of the things with our younger grades that we have not mentioned is that we were very, very different during COVID. And then we went to very, very different during this. And that shift of 2 hours instead of 1, it was a 1-hour shift for high school. It was a 2-hour for our youngers. That was hard. And then we threw in buses that show up sometimes and not. And oh my God, I cannot imagine being an elementary parent this year. It has not been a fair test of the system. It just hasn't. We haven't had enough time, and we haven't taken those lessons that we've learned and really applied them. So I think that at least a year makes sense. I understand the caution of going, well, a year really means 2, maybe. But even then, we are getting better at this, and we are getting some things. Now, I can tell you that I want to be fair, right? Every time I come and I meet with people here at the high school, I go, so what do you think? How have you liked it? And they said, well, we like it in the morning because now I've been coming to senior projects. And they go, man, getting here at 7:30 again kind of sucks. This was hard. But in the afternoon, we lose steam a little bit. And that's something we didn't do before. So the mornings have been better, but now the afternoons, it was kind of an unexpected. It's kind of hard to keep their attention in the afternoon. That was something I would never have imagined, right? And so I do think that trying to find a way with the overall schedule to let that afternoon be a little freer at the very end when we can would make a lot of sense. I think especially for those who have jobs, who have internships, who have ELOs, all those things we want to do anyway. Trying to add some flexibility there would be great. And so I would just don't paint with too broad a brush. I do think that tweaks sound like, oh, it's only going to help a little bit. Sometimes small tweaks make a huge difference. And again, just thank you for the incredible lift I know it is, and for your willingness to really try your best to make it successful for everyone, because it makes a huge difference. And they are really important programs. They are. And so I don't ever think that sports are looked at as an afterthought. They are students first, but student athletes, it's important. It is. So thank you for all you've done.
Thank you, Terry. Mr. Fayou.
I'm in kind of a neutral position because I really enjoy the extra time in the morning, and I know that's research based, that the kids get a lot out of having that extra few minutes of sleep. But I also run into, being a hockey parent, I run into some big problems in the afternoons because my son has had to, the hockey practice starts at Conway Arena, so almost every day is an away game for him. It starts at 4. He has to leave here by 3 because he needs time to get his equipment on. It's 25 minutes to get there. Any traffic, he can be late. And there's been many times when he's had to miss chemistry for away games, practices 4 days a week. And the 5th day is usually game day. So I don't think he's ever made an 8th period during the school year, during hockey season, because, and that runs into a lot of problems too, because he's had times when he needed extra help in math, and that was the only time the math teacher was available. So not having the opportunity for him to get in there and get that extra help that he needed really hurt him during that period. So there are some serious consequences that we're experiencing because of this. And coming out of a COVID period where he's already behind in math, he's in the accelerated program. So, it's a lot of work for him. So to fall behind, it just puts him even farther behind the bubble. You know what I mean? So it's important that we figure out on every level. I know hockey is run by Nashua, but we need to put pressure on Nashua so that they understand our situation here and don't keep pushing the same status quo year after year, ignoring our needs.
You're 100% right. For what it's worth, it might be important to know prior to this year, the hockey team practiced at 3. So Nashua did make that flip for us because we didn't have a choice. We wouldn't have been able to, that was an absolute hard line that we had to draw. There was no way that was going to possibly work. So, we've got to be willing to explore other rinks, quite frankly. Conway is where we've always been, but just because it has been doesn't mean it should be. And if there's better availability with better times that are going to suit both schools better, then we need to absolutely explore that. And now's the time to do it. So I'm with you, and we'll work.
Thank you. Mr. Gothier.
So one comment, one quick question, and then one that will actually need a more robust answer. The comment is, we're doing this recommendation now. I think next year, can we request this to be done in February maybe, so we can actually make that decision? We're sort of handcuffed tonight. We can't change this because we only have a few months left. So I think that's troublesome with this conversation, which at this point is just elementary. Second point, do we expect other towns to do this, or are we still on an island by ourselves?
There are other towns, as I said during the process, other towns said, we're exploring this, we're thinking, we want to see how you guys do with it. I've not seen other towns.
But nothing has been confirmed yet. Okay. I'm sorry?
Oh, thank you. You're right.
Keene did it?
Keene changed their start time late, and there's a Seacoast.
Oyster River.
Yeah, and that's the Seacoast, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
okay.
You get a ding ding.
So those are just the two quick ones ahead. The third one is the most important thing that we haven't touched upon yet, is how are we going to determine if this is a success other than tangible? Well, the athletics works out, kids get to sleep later, which I still find they sleep later, but they're not going to bed earlier. But I digress. What metrics are we going to use to determine, in February what that recommendation is going to be? Something tangible, something that we actually can track.
My answer is I would suggest that we survey parents, students, and staff again, because the difference from this year to next year will be telling. If you remember, staff are heavily against the new start times. 2/3 didn't like it. Students were slightly in favor of the new start times compared to the old, barely, a very small 2% margin. And parents were almost identical. I think there was almost 5 votes different from one to the other. So seeing that play through another fall, parents are most engaged in the fall with things like this. And so a survey, probably late October, early November would be my recommendation, because you'll know by then if there's a significant change in those responses. To me, that's the most important metric, is how our community feels about those times.
So I think that we can use, under that philosophy, I think we're looking at the same. We could have taken a survey on parents with masks and say, do you think masks are good or bad in October? And we would have had the same results that we had at our meeting in August. That's not a tangible, we're doing this for science of kids needing more sleep. High school kids need to get up later. They, whether or not they go to bed earlier or not, are they changing the sleep patterns? So is it test scores? I mean, there has to be something that we can put a handle on. So when we go back to the elementary school parents or the high school parents and saying, we're still going to be 30 minutes shy in education, or the elementary school parents, your kid's still going to be at the bus stop at 5:45 on a Tuesday morning, or 6 o'clock on a Tuesday. I don't think it's been 5. It's not been that bad this year, but it's still going to be dark when they're at the bus stop. We need to be able to say scientifically, this is the reason that we're doing this, and not, well, so, I mean, it just has to be something there. So we don't have to decide that now, but we need to have that as part of whatever we're going to fall back on to justify this in the future.
Yeah. School Liaison Ryan.
On that, when we do the survey next year, and I appreciate Mr. O'Keefe forwarding me the board update that was done on this in February, because I had not seen that before. But I thought it was interesting how a lot of the stuff was broken out by grade, by parents, by grades, by kids. I would like to see that for the staff also. Like, is it the elementary school staff that hates it and the high school staff that loves it, or vice versa? And there may be no patterns there, but I think it would be nice to know what patterns, because that helps us potentially adjust whatever their concerns are. And then a follow-up on that, when we've got this 65, almost 70% of staff that wants to go back to the old time, was there a sense from the surveys on what the primary concerns were, or why, why?
Yeah, the comments were kind of all over the place, and we didn't spend a lot of time analyzing the comments, because I read through every single one of them, every parent comment, every student comment, every staff comment, and they're all over the place. From my own personal childcare issues to I'm a morning person, to this is how it affects my science classroom, my kids leaving early, and how it affects what I'm trying to teach in my classroom. So all over the place from the staff.
So I do want to piggyback on something that she said and Mr. Gauthier said, and that's the survey process, right? And so if we're going to survey in October, one thing that we kind of committed to when we first started down this path with Ms. Beam's hard work on the committee a couple years back, were to stay in constant contact with the community in terms of their feedback. So we only did one survey, and for us to even contemplate making a decision off of one survey results on one day, just not enough data set. And so if we're going to set this up for a discussion in February, we should be surveying in October, we should be surveying in December, we should be surveying in February as well. And so we can see if there's a path or a pattern about improvement, or some stronger concerns on one mechanism versus another. Are teachers complaining more in December than they are in October? Are parents really upset in October and not so much in December? Because I think that's the stuff that we can then formulate. Tardinesses going into our schools. Are they on the decline? This year is clearly not a year that we can use that data set, because our buses were so phenomenally late for close to 6 months. In Mount Vernon, our kids are being dropped off 30 minutes before school even starts. The buses just dump them in the gym. The buses go to do the high school run. So we've got kids in the gym in Mount Vernon now for 30 minutes with no instructional time, just hanging out. So like all of that stuff is the stuff that we probably would want to get a better understanding between now and next February.
I agree.
Cool.
Agreed.
If I could just add from the middle school, and I agree, Terry, there's lots of things that we could do differently and model more right after the high school did this year. I think this year for us was that learning curve and being a little bit more understanding and trying to be maybe not such the group that was going to tell the other middle schools who got out way earlier that instead of coming here an hour early, they're going to be coming, or an hour later, they'd be coming here 2 hours later than their let out time. But I do appreciate and want to thank all the families. And I'm not sure if you knew, but from some of our busing issues, we actually had families come right at our dismissal. Because what was nice is they were able to show up and do the carpooling aspect for transportation. So I appreciate all of their support and flexibility in helping us and get our students out there to athletic competitions. That was great.
Nice. Ms. Clark.
I just want to address a couple of things. So you mentioned some objective data points. So part of the items in the survey, at least to the parents, was asking about some specific data points about their perception of their child's performance. So if we continue or have a dialogue about what those surveys will look like in the future, obviously more input can be put in than just like me, like taking a guessing conversation with Adam. But there are more objective data points that we can pull from in addition to test scoring. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I don't know how widespread this is, but this is part of like the perception, right? Particularly for elementary school age children, is that like I'm the parent that has elementary school age child. I get an hour to an hour and 20 minutes with my child in the evening because she has to go to bed in time to get enough sleep to be up and on the bus and at school. So yes, she's an early riser. She gets up at 6 a.m. on her own. However, I have to send her to bed now about 45 minutes earlier than I normally would have, and I lose time with my kid. And I'm not thrilled with that because we are two working parents. And I know that there are other families who share that challenge with elementary school age children. And with that, there was this perception. I have no idea how widespread it was, but some parents had brought up to me that they saw high school students doing practices in the mornings. And they were given the understanding that this was to help the older age group to get more sleep, but then they're seeing that time instead be used for practices. So I fully understand there's like a huge amount of challenges, and I fully agree that we need to like have more data points and more time to see how this and work out the kinks and whatnot. But I don't know if that is something that was like a small percentage of practices or if that was a more widespread thing. But the perception is like we're trying to do what's best for the older age group, but then we're going to end up using that time anyway for practices. And now our kids were getting minimal time. Right?
I can answer it, and Kelly can back me up, but I want to because she was a part of it, so I want to speak and look out for. So she had to make some choices where sometimes some ice hockey teams could have a practice at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, or 7:30 in the morning. And between those two evils, she picked sometimes, very rarely, I don't know how many times this year,
7, I think.
in the morning.
I know it's a rock and a hard place. Like I totally get that.
Yeah, and I mean, hockey, I'm sure Dan can speak to it. Hockey's a totally different animal. When you can get ice time from these rinks is a challenge. And even prior to the start time, there were eons ago where our boys team used to practice at 5:45 in the morning. And obviously other concerns with that, right? Like who's, weather. If you've got weather, you're getting up at, 4 o'clock now to make the determination whether that's okay. 7 seemed like an okay-ish, like we're not losing the instructional time at the end, nor keeping kids out until 10 o'clock and then driving home at 11. But yeah, they're, maybe once a week. I think December was the time we were hit the hardest because I just couldn't get any practice time. But yeah, that was used very sparingly. And I think that was the only team, that did it. And it was strictly out of necessity.
So we'll take a couple more questions.
So I think it was like a choir or something practice too, or special. Wasn't there something else that was in the morning? A cappella was in the morning, yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get it. It's fair.
Now I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. When we do the survey, I think one of the data points we need to make sure that we look at is we make sure we listen and survey or do a data point that has to do with our teachers. They're the professionals in the classroom that are seeing the engagement and lack of engagement in the kids, and I think there needs to be some sort of data point around that when we do a survey. And I know one of the comments that was made. I think it was someone from the middle school. There's a comment about how many kids are now missing because they're making medical appointments and dental appointments and way more than they ever did because now they can't get the appointments after school. So now they're missing school to do all that stuff, which they hadn't seen the number. I guess it was quite an increased number, which again, it's just another piece. So
The challenge with some of those professionals is that they don't have office hours after a certain time. And also remember, from our own children, you have to usually book those 6 to 8 months in advance. So
You're stuck.
planning ahead to plan ahead
Yep.
is always
It is what it is. Right?
Exactly.
So I just want to say, let's make sure we listen to the teachers when we do data point
Those
surveys.
convenient shuttles to pick up kids at school to go get braces, you know.
Yeah, I saw that. That's unbelievable.
Any other questions? Mr. Conklin?
Just a point of clarity on acapella. So it was once a week for those kids who are passionate about it. It wasn't like an everyday thing. So the benefit was if you really love to sing, then you can get up early once a week, but you're not getting up early every day of the week to catch the bus.
Thank you. Mr. Glover?
Thanks. Just a few reactions to some of the themes. I think Tom's onto something when he says, what about the metrics? Because what Julie reminded me of us was when this came to us, it was data-driven, scientific, clinically demonstrated to show net positive effects on student health and academic performance. Tardiness went down, engagement in the classroom went up, test scores went up, and it was a whole host of successes there. How you measure that at the beginning of the process, I'm not really sure, but we should definitely explore that. And that's not, and I push back on what Adam said a little bit, which is to say it's not the most important is how our community feels about it at any given time. If there are data that show that it is better for our students, it's incumbent upon us to persuade our community that we're doing the right thing in the interest of our students. Okay, I thought you would. But so the survey results are a data point, but they're not necessarily the decision-making data point. And we need to figure that out. So I'm with you on that, Tom. I think just to remind everyone too that it was really important not to schedule activities before the later start time for the older kids. It's obviously interesting because it's like, oh, well, we have all this time. Well, that defeats the whole point. And so there's concerted effort not to do that en masse. And then the last thing is about this notion a lot of people had said, Stephanie had said, Anna mentioned it, Terry mentioned it a bit, and others, about lack of instructional time and athletics and kind of at the end of the day. So maybe there is some work, you're looking at some internal things about shifting the master schedule around so that the core four are in the earlier periods. So who said that it's the study period at the end of the day, or maybe more electives, things that if you do miss them, they're not crushing you for your core academic performance. So you're not missing your chemistry labs, you're not missing your social studies classes and your math and your English. Is an idea. I've heard in some sidebar conversations that maybe looking at the 30 minutes of club time and seeing how kids are actually utilizing that. And maybe there's an impact on athletics. We always have this culture of you can be in a club and you can be in athletics, but maybe there's some give and take. Maybe some athletes, for example, if they want to also be in clubs, maybe they get an excuse to come to practice late, and they're not penalized for that because they take the time and it's a little bit later for them. It's just an idea. It's just sort of putting this on there in a way that if it's data driven and we believe in that and we don't change the start times back, how can we fix some of the structural problems with the lost instructional time? And we have these little windows in the 30 minutes and we have a little bit of play with what we can do in our master schedule. So I just want to get that out there for everybody to chew on.
For some clarification, we don't start practices till 3:45 for exactly that reason, so that they can both do things. I mean, obviously, if you're getting dismissed for a game, that's it. But hopefully, at least 2 or 3 days a week, they're able to do that.
That's excellent. I guess the concept why I didn't finish the thought was take that time back to the classroom. So if you take that 30 minutes back to the classroom, if some of the some of the feedback from the teachers was, I don't have enough instructional time to get through all of my material, maybe there's a 30-minute block there that we could look at and re-examine. That's kind of where I was going with that, but I didn't quite get there. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Thank you all for the feedback.
Do you have a time frame that we are going to want to discuss, like data points and whatnot? Is that going to be something that we'll want to talk about in the fall? Like, is there? I need to read literature. That's why I'm like, reading science takes time.
September?
Yeah, we talked about it right in September when we open school.
In terms of how the data points that we're going to collect in September? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, with an agenda in September.
Any other questions before we move on? I want to thank the two of you guys for taking your time out of your day to come join us. This is a very important conversation that the community has been asking us to have. And, you know, your front row seat is really a great lens for us to view this issue through. So thank you very much for your help, both of you.
Yeah,
You're welcome. Yes. We were going to open it up for a public comment period. I thought there would be some more people in attendance. I don't see any, but oh, yep, oh, perfect. This isn't JFAC yet, but this is school start time. So
Yeah.
perfect. Okay.
No, that's what I'm here to comment on. Thanks, Shannon Gascoigne, Amherst. Exciting to hear you all have this discussion. I agree completely with everything that Mr. Gothier said in terms of data points. In Minnesota, which was the first state in the country to really take later start times and study them, all of the data that was really kind of used by the committee to make these recommendations to SAU 39 was over at least a 3-year period. And they measured things like, you know, test scores, mental health, what else? Car crashes, substance abuse, all of those things. So I would encourage you, as you're considering what lens to use moving forward. We're here, 8 months maybe into it, in a year where it's already been addressed. We had numerous bus issues that were really outside of the control of the start times. Lots of things to work through. Yes, it's important to hear from teachers, students, families, but it's an adjustment period for everyone. So if you really want to give this the lens that it deserves in terms of really putting those kind of scientific elements to it, you need more time. You just do. And I would say, to the point of it's like Mr. Gothier said and Mr. White said, it's probably not a year. It's probably 2 years, right? So that's all I have to say. Thank you for the discussion, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Comment just for the start times? Or
Yeah, just start times. Then we're going to have a more general public comment period at the end. So this is 2 of 3.
Thanks.
This was an opportunity for really to surround this particular piece of the conversation before any decisions may have potentially made. So thank you. Saying no more, I don't really think there's a decision needs to be made out of here other than thank you. Just continue to keep us updated. There's no motion or vote or anything that needs to be taken place.
I don't know if the plan was to vote
Okay.
or just keep status quo if that works.
Great.
Well, see, if that was a recommendation, I mean, if it's a recommendation, don't we need to sort of codify that recommendation?
Recommendation from,
It was, Mr. Steele said that he recommends that we leave start times as they are for 22, 23. To me, that
Okay.
makes it seem like we were going to potentially change those unless it was just, this is what we're going to do and this is why. But his phrasing made it seem like we were going to.
yeah, we
vote on
can,
this tonight.
absolutely, we can go on the record and just continue to support the current start time on schedule. If that's something we want to do. Take a motion for that. Great. Made by Ms. Precy, seconded by Ms. Clark. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of continuing our current start times as currently set? Okay, opposed? One opposed?
No.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
I was opposed.
Yep.
I just wanted to, okay.
And abstention?
Looking at me when I looked up. So.
And one abstention. Did you get that? Yep.
I just want to make one, we talked about some dates of doing surveys, and can we have those in the minutes?
I'll need them in the minutes. Thank
Just
you.
to remind us that,
Yeah, we'll need them all in the minutes. So.
yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to do the data set presentation to us in September.
Yep, we're going to talk
Survey in
about
October, or at least my recommendation is, and you guys will obviously come up with a game plan.
that. I think you're right.
Again in December, and then
February.
again in February, and then a discussion in February.
Yep, I think that works.
Okay.
Yep, that'll be in the minutes and that'll help us. Thank
Great.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to, yes. That's okay.
So do we need people to look at the existing survey and are we going to modify it and update it for the next round of surveys? Is that, and who's doing that and when's it going to be ready so we can look at it type of thing and all that?
That would be my recommendation. Kristen Clark did a fantastic job writing the survey with even more data points than we included, but she was very helpful in that process. And I think reviewing over the summer, you said, Steve?
Yeah, I think we said we're going to talk about it in the fall, about what those data points are going to be. So I think we can have something, in September. I heard you mention that. So if we can review that in September, that gives us time to set that schedule for
Before it's launched.
October, December, February, and then make that recommendation for the new board to see that.
Okay.
Like just the observation made about doctor's appointments wasn't something that like I had seen mentioned in the literature, so I could not conceive of that to add to the survey, which is why having a group collaboration to develop these things and get feedback is so important because everyone makes these other observations and hears these comments that are valuable.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to our JFAC conversation. I believe we're going to have Ms. Parisi lead this conversation, backed up by Ms. Gascoigne.
Sure, I'm going to lead this conversation, and Ms. Gascoigne has arrived to be able to support this conversation.
Hello.
So at both the Amherst School Board meeting and the Sohegan School Board meeting, we have all discussed moving forward with a joint committee to look at our Amherst facilities. I apologize, but I have not touched base with Mont Vernon, so I'm not exactly sure where you guys stand, other than telling us in a prior SAU meeting that everything's kind of all set up on the hill and that you guys have a good plan going on right now. So I feel confident in where they are. That being said, I don't know that there was anything that came out of the Sohegan or the Amherst meeting that would make me think that we needed a large discussion right now, other than are we ready to move forward with the Joint Facilities Committee? I'm happy to open it for conversation if there's any further conversation that anybody wants to partake in. Any specific questions from an SAU board perspective. But again, I think from my perspective and Shannon's perspective, we are like waiting for people to give the okay and then calling on all these community members who hopefully are listening and who still want to participate in the important work of our school buildings and keeping us up to date.
I will start off the conversation by saying thank you very much for your diligent efforts over the last year and a half plus. Right, it was led by Ms. Facey at the beginning. The baton was passed over to you and Victoria. I mean, the collaboration the two of you guys did, the presentations to the community, to us, were phenomenal. And I always felt informed, so thank you very much for that. I know the two of you guys did a deck at our last meeting that you forwarded out to the entire membership, and in there was proposed language for a motion tonight.
Correct.
And so not modifying any of that, I just captured that. I don't know if you have the opportunity to put that up on the screen there.
Take a minute.
For Shannon's deck. Sure?
It's on the ground in front of you.
Yeah, I need to turn on the projector too.
Thank you. I think it was pretty encompassing based on the conversation that we had at our Sohegan meeting and trying to make sure that this was a district-wide conversation, so it wasn't necessarily just to build one building or one subset to address their concerns, but to make sure that all of the stakeholders for our district were on the same page.
Correct.
And I think that collaboration is key to sort of this process going forward, and you guys did a great job of it, and just carrying the baton based in the motion that you did. So I'm prepared to present the motion that you guys prepared, and I'll open it up for discussion prior to doing anything from a formal standpoint. Does anyone want to talk about the prospects of JFAC? We had a pretty in-depth conversation at our Sohegan meeting, so. Ms. Grant.
Clarification point. Does that mean Mont Vernon's not going to be included in the JFAC committee?
Mont Vernon would be included from the perspective that we have JFAC and then we have building and grounds committees for each school, and it's up to each school,
I want to make sure.
more about what it means. So, and Sarah is already the, it might be more than one of you. Is it just you? Sarah's already the liaison. So like the two of us have sent some emails back and forth to make sure that she's.
That's going to be, I think it's going to be really important for Sohegan to understand all the different building products going on up in Mont Vernon, because of if we do things at Sohegan, then we are affecting tax rates and with.
Oh, I'm pretty
projects,
into it, so
I
don't worry
want to make
about that.
sure we have, like, if you hear something about Sohegan's talking about, they're like, hold on, we got.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure there's definitely a Mount Vernon route.
There is a Mount Vernon route, and
Perfect.
we are prepared to be engaged in the process so that we can help to inform our community.
I saw you do this.
Also be informed about.
Maybe we compare slacks.
And Stephanie, on the second page there, can you just go one more page? That's the makeup for the recommendation in terms of how the structure is going to be. Questions, comments, concerns? Mr. Conklin.
So I just want to say I think the work of JFAC is vital for everything our community is asking for. We have to kind of act as one district even though we're not. And so especially with big capital items, making sure that we're aligned. And that's the kind of work that it's really hard for individual boards to do. So the work of JFAC is vital to help us communicate and do the heavy lifting on facilities projects so that the board can do all the other things that we have to do as board members. So I appreciate all the work that's been done. I look forward to the work that will be done and the fact that we have a whole slew of people who are interested in taking part. Community involvement is key to this process, and I think JFAC will really help us do that moving forward. Thank you.
Sorry. One thing that I just want to mention from the director of facilities, Roger Preston, part of his belief in using a building and grounds committee is not that this is a 1 year type of position. This building and grounds committee would be, looking at where we are currently, but also planning for the future. So over the last 5 years, while Adam has been driving the ship and then Roger has come on board, and has really planned for the capital needs assessment and making sure that he's maintaining the facilities. The idea is that we won't hit, with this type of planning, we won't hit another patch in our future where we're not paying attention as a town to our facilities and the importance of making sure that we really place value in our facilities and in spending the time to participate in a committee like this shows as a district and as a group of boards our commitment to that.
And it allows the community to be a part of it and to make a real investment and commitment to sustaining and maintaining, what we invest in as taxpayers and residents in a meaningful way.
Perfect. Any other comments? Seeing none, I will make the motion to have the SAU 39 board reauthorize the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee and request that they, bullet point number 1, provide affirmation, verification, and prioritization of projects, changes to the scope of a major capital improvement projects and long-range facility plans of the Amherst School Board, Mount Vernon School Board, and Sohegan Cooperative School Board. Provide a medium for the dissemination of facilities information, reports and materials to the community relative to the SAU 39 and its long-range facilities plans. Collaborate with the SAU 39 Director of Facilities to support and provide consultation and guidance to the SAU 39 Board and individual boards on matters relating to minor and major capital improvement projects. Perform other review and recommendation functions as directed by the boards. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Copier. Discussion? Mr. Glover.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we amend the word board in the first to district. It's really the plans of the districts, not the plans of the boards, I think, in terms of long-term strategy. And to maybe also include the SAU facilities as an express piece of that, to the extent Brick School needs anything. Why would we exclude a facility?
It's indirectly included because it's owned by the Amherst School
Amherst.
District.
It's on their school. Okay. Okay, fair point there. Then,
This is the first year of that 5 years on it.
okay, fair enough. So I move to amend the motion to replace the word board with the word district in the first bullet.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Grund. Any discussion on the amendment?
I have a question.
Sure.
Does that change?
Sorry, does that wording, and forgive me, I'm not a policy person, does that wording then make it so that any, we've budgeted for certain, in Mount Vernon, for certain projects to happen? Would that wording then mean that we would have to ask for prioritization within JFAC and then this SAU board before we could do the planned and budgeted projects? Okay, sorry, that's all I wanted, then that's fine.
It's an advisory action.
And I'm sorry, I know the boards are, so I hope this is okay. The reason that we put boards, because any action that, any recommendation that JFAC would bring would need to be obviously, voted on and discussed and ratified by each individual board. So I don't know that district, I mean, I don't know, we just put boards because it, the final say is up to the board.
No shine on your
And,
effort, by the way.
That's kind of what the thinking was there.
Any other discussion on the motion? Ms.
Is
Gleason?
there a reason it's affirmation/verification instead of just recommendations?
But we're on the motion to change board to district.
Okay.
I know, I'm sorry. We'll come back to that though.
All right.
Any other discussion on that? Let's do a vote. All in favor of changing board to district for the Amherst School Board to Amherst School District, Mount Vernon School Board to Mount Vernon School District, and Sohegan Cooperative School Board to Sohegan Cooperative School District.
So before we vote, can I add one more comment?
Sure.
I mean, we do have the final, the bullet point number 3 says as directed by the boards.
Mhm.
And I mean, I don't know. It just seems to me that if it's boards up above, it ought to be boards down below. If it's districts, then it's, I don't know.
I'll respond a little bit to that from my perspective. We have a lot of loose language. We interchange district, board, and SAU, sort of wherever we hear them say, oh, throughout the district. Well, no. What they're really saying is throughout the SAU, but you have to pay attention because if that's in a Sohegan meeting, then maybe that's Sohegan only, or maybe that is the SAU. So it's the plans of the district as put forward by its sitting board at the time when those plans are executed, which may be tossed down to the next board or new membership. And every election it could change and so on and so forth. So it's really the district makes plans through the vehicle of the board
Then should
at
the
any
last
given
one
time.
be as directed by the districts, plural, possessive boards?
If you make the first change.
Yeah, if you
Yeah,
make the
by
first
the
change.
districts as boards
Yeah.
or boards of the districts. Yes. That would be another amendment.
We checked it with the parliamentarian about the process.
Any other discussion about the motion change? Seeing none, all in favor of changing the word board to district, raise your hand. Yeah. 1,
I can
2,
even pull
3.
the SAU voting spreadsheet.
Yes, go ahead.
Luckily, it's available. Yeah.
All right, all in favor, raise your hands again.
Take me a second. Sure I don't make any mistakes here. I see anybody who voted yes? No. Good.
Great.
Oh, wait.
All opposed, raise your hand.
Oh, thank you. Jason, did you vote yet? Copiers, did you vote yet? Okay.
And abstentions. 2. So that motion passes.
Motion fails.
Oh, it fails. What's the?
It got 7 people voted yes, 5 from Sohegan, which means they got 2.5 votes.
Thank you.
2 from Mount Vernon, which means 2 of their 3 votes. So that's 4.5. Requires at least 4.51 to pass out of 9 possible votes.
Okay. So that motion fails. It's the reason why we have the spreadsheet. Okay, and Anna, do you want to make the second motion?
No, because I think
Okay.
it's moot. It's moot now.
I
It's
know.
just a continuity if the
Just
other
wanted to
one is
ask,
done.
that's all.
So
So we're back to the original motion to pass as recommended by JFAC.
So I guess I did have an amendment to that. Sorry, I was thinking about
Sure.
the districts plural. I think on the first bullet,
Go
I guess
back.
I'm open to discussing it. I don't know that it needs to be changed, but it seems like it should say provide recommendations on the prioritization of projects.
I wouldn't disagree with that. This was really a this was a suggestion to guide our conversation last month. And then I sent it out and asked for any feedback, which I didn't get. So that's great. I mean, I love having conversation and have sought that. So recommendation, affirmation, I feel safe to go out on a limb and say that would probably be great with anyone involved.
I think it was Sarah maybe who asked before about, do we have to get permission? Was that you who meant? Oh, that was Kristen,
Yeah.
sorry. I came down here.
Yeah, this seems a little more formal.
That makes
Yeah,
it clear
I agree.
that it's not, it's the
Yeah.
recommendation.
Sarah, what was the
For sure.
language that you're recommending?
Yeah.
Replace affirmation/verification of with recommendations on.
Okay.
So provide recommendations on the prioritization of projects, blah, blah, blah.
So would you like to make a motion for that?
Yes.
Great. Second?
Sarah can second, or anybody can second.
Oh, I just hit the delete button. It's gone. I just was going to really type it in. Hold on. Let me just pull it back up here.
Maybe this one won't be controversial.
We don't think we need this.
Okay.
You can pull it out if we need it, but.
And Anna, I'm sorry, just that language real fast
It'll
again.
be obvious in a second.
Anna, the language one more time. I'm sorry. I hit the delete button and it deleted the whole thing.
Provide recommendations on the prioritization of projects, and then the rest will be the same.
Thank you. Great. So first and second end, any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion on the table? Great. That's passed. So the new motion is now amended to provide recommendations on the prioritization of projects and then the rest of the bullet points up on the screen. Any additional discussion?
I'll just close it out and say thank you to everybody. This is great. It's a good step forward to all working together, how we have been, and just continue. For anyone who is watching from home now or in the future, there will be communication coming out through JFAC in the future, and we'll make sure that everybody hears about that.
Absolutely. All right, seeing no further discussion, let's call the vote into the motion on the floor. All in favor, please raise your hands. Great, that motion passes unanimously. Awesome. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you all. Would you let me turn this off?
We're open for another public comment if you'd like to.
Yeah.
remain.
You guys are good. You're good. Have a good night. Thank you.
Leave it, because I think we've got another public comment.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thanks, Shannon. All right, public comment 3 of 3. Please state your name, town in which you reside. You'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Kelly Schmidt, Amherst. And what I wanted to talk about was and I forget the official title of it, the whole teacher, almost assessments, whatever the educated, thank you. I was like, I know I have the wrong terms. First, I find it incredibly commendable that you want to support staff that need assistance, and I really like all the plans that you have for that. So the whole thing that you've presented so far, I love it. But I'd also be interested in hearing what plans there are to recognize exceptional staff that is outside of standard New Hampshire Excellence Awards and things like that. I kind of view it similar to the analogy you made of meeting the students where they are. We've talked about as a district high achieving students and kind of meeting their needs and giving above and beyond to them. So it's the same idea for those teachers that are or staff. I mean, to me, it's not limited to teachers. It covers also the plans you had for paras and others. Just ways of continuing to encourage the exceptional things that they bring. And to me, it's just a way to look to differentiate some sort of above and beyond effort that they do. And my thoughts really came originally from looking very specifically at the last Amherst AEA teachers contract that unfortunately was voted down. But one of my thought processes in there is that we're giving teachers steps and other things in there, and there's nothing besides a contract renewal that says, wow, you did a fantastic job. And I'm not saying it should be a financial reward or anything like that, but we have a lot of really wonderful teachers. And I want to be able to recognize our really wonderful teachers above and beyond, PTA appreciation days and things like that, in something that comes from the district, that comes from the administration that says, wow, really pat on the back this particular year or this particular cycle, even if it's, a multi-year time of checking in on them. So just food for thought on that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all right. And seeing no other members of the public present, let's close public comment. And we do not have a non-public tonight. So we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. 7:45. Great. Ms. Peter, seconded. Ms. Grund, Ms. Goulet, well, we'll make you find it out. But Ms. Grund, raise your hand first. All in favor, say aye.
Get the spreadsheet out, Adam.